appointed, Matthew Bailey Begbie to be the first judge of British Columbia. And he did the traditional British practice of riding a circuit. So he would go out and dispense justice for about 6 months of the year or something like that. Held in open weather if the weather was good, otherwise in his tent. Now they say that between 1859 and 1872, Begbie presided over trials by jury of just 52 murder cases, um, with 5 individuals acquitted, 9 found guilty of lesser charge, and 38 convicted. And this is where you get into stuff of the 27 who were hanged. 22 were Native people, 1 Chinese, and 4 whites. To the extent that anyone got a bad deal, it was not surprisingly this is me quoting, Indian people. They possessed few, if any, means to defend themselves against non-whites who were inevitably their accusers, since disputes only between Indians were avoided. So it's like, the first judge hanging a lot of Native people. The justice system right from the beginning stacked against Native people in our thing. Douglas, the governor of British Columbia, of these now kind of unified actually I don't know if it's unified, but he did a lot of spending on transportation system of getting highways, of getting trails built. Probably spent a lot, maybe too much, because he ends up, as he retires, being the province is really, really in debt at the time. Douglas is definitely a forceful autocrat. A young girl meeting Douglas in 1860 was perhaps the most astute. A glove of velvet on a hand of steel. Although Douglas appeared to act within his legitimate powers, these were not so constraining as to limit his authority. He was definitely an autocrat. He favored the Britons, all the Britons, native-born Britons in Victoria, much more over than the kind of lower class Canadians, people coming from the other kind of colonies of Canada that were going to become the Dominion of Canada. And the mainland of Canada, a large part Canadian, were particularly resentful. Leading political opposition was Amour de Cosmos, who was a guy who changed his name to Lover of the World for. We're not exactly quite sure. He was William Smith to Amour de Cosmos. We don't know exactly why. It's a little bit thing. Amour de Cosmos and John Robson, both newspaper guys who used their pulpit to kind of denounce a lot of his policies that were really favoring the Brits over anyone else. They wanted the political representation, like stuff like in Nova Scotia, which is indeed where I think it's Amour de Cosmos came from. Yeah, de Cosmos was a Nova Scotian who arrived in 1858 as well. A lot of it's the gold rush bringing these guys in. Douglas and his cronies on Vancouver Island were very much against popular representation, because that would soon swamp their power of influence of being appointed by the colonial office. And indeed, when they do actually get some sort of representation, it's like 9 of the people are elected popularly, and the rest of the 23 are all government appointments and securely in Douglas's pocket. Now the thing is, the economic boom ends. The HBC's political influence, as exercised through Douglas, ended with the colonial office appointing 2 new career administrators as the colony's new governments. It's like the economic boom comes to the end. The HBC's basically shrunks down, so it doesn't have any of that political interest anymore. They've sold off its Nanaimo coal interests and much of its residential land in Victoria. In 1864, Fort Victoria itself was dismantled. Douglas himself, he retires. We get these 2 career administrators. The most significant one being Frederick Seymour, another street name. All these guys became street names. In 1866, Vancouver, there's a union of the Vancouver Island and the mainland into the colony of British Columbia, where we have this whole thing of just 9 of the 23 of the legislative thing were were popularly elected, and the remainder were either senior civil servants or government appointees. There's mentions here of the Chinese population, how that they actually, of the people that came in with the gold rush, actually stuck it out, stayed. They and the native population would do the hard work to work these claims and actually still extract money from them when a lot of the white miners had left for kind of greener fields again. There's a mention here of how there's some things of like in some cases non-material factors contributed to like white settlers decisions to remain, as with Emily Carr's father, who had originally emigrated from England to California. It irked father to live under any flag other than his own. So in 1863, he and his family set sail up the west coast of America till they came to the most English-tasting bit of all England, Victoria, on the south end of Vancouver Island, which was then a crown colony. So yeah, so you get immigrants from the United States who didn't want to be United States; they wanted to stay British, and which is when you get a lot of the opposition that's going to come later to: are we going to stay a British colony, or are we going to become a part of Canada? Ugh, who would want that? But and also there's notes here of like, hey, well, there's gold here that's run out, but hey, what about lumber? What about coal? What about still a bit of the fur trade going on? Here, let me see if I can skip to. Oh, there's here's just a totally personal thing for myself. They're talking about that all the pack trains were one of the other opportunities of just transport was the stuff, and all the setting up of all these roadhouses along the way. One of those roadhouses was most impressive by an early account was 150 Mile House, consisting of a large square unfinished house, billiard rooms, lots of geese, ducks, and chicken. 150 Mile House is where my mother and father-in-law lived for a good hunk of their life, just outside of Williams Lake. So yes, it's one of these. It's like, oh, I've been to 150 Mile House more times than I can mention, which just like, it's one of those things of like, oh, I'm reading history about my own province. I've been to these places. I know these places, which, it's not interesting to anyone else, but it is to me. Oh, the next paragraph of this though has something incredibly sad. That a lot of the entrepreneur stuff that happened, there were successes, but there were tons of failures. One of them being a caribou packer imported 23 camels, asserting each could carry twice as much as a mule without the same feeding problems. But they got mired in the mules and horses' iron hooves, the mud made by them, were unable to move. Their sweat frightened other animals. In the end, the other packers got a court injunction ordering the camels off the road. In disgust, their owner turned them loose, and for years they appeared as apparitions, frightening interior travelers. It's like all these poor camels wandering around the interior. Oh, that is just so brutal, and I can't think that those creatures would be made to survive the cold of interior winters. It's just like, so yeah, that's just a sad thing of just like coming across a camel in the middle of in the interior. Just like, that would be so odd, but also so sad for those creatures. Speaking of like the interior, they talk about like the first cattle ranches appeared in the Caribou in 1863. Other ranching began in the Okanagan, Thompson, and Nicola valleys. It was interesting. They have a whole lot thing here of like, there's a lot of kind of activities that were kind of generated, volunteer activities like fire brigade, stuff like that. There was literary things. A Caribou Literary Society was founded at Williams Creek in the spring of 1863, so that men could meet and talk and once again feel themselves to be part of the world of music, books, and the arts that had all been left behind upon entering the gold fields. And I mean, there's a thing saying here, like, the communities that were springing up in British Columbia of the 1860s were predominantly male. It's just that was not a good sign for, is this going to be a viable place? Because there weren't families. There were just single men. Without them, women, the men will never settle in this country. And indeed, women got shipped into the country, and they have a whole thing here of in 1862, 36, and then we're 62 women arrived in September, 36 in the next January, I think in Victoria, and there's most have been, of pretty looking young women, ages varying from 14 to uncertain figure. A few are young widows who have been seen better days. Most appear to have been well raised and generally seem a superior lot to the women. The women usually met on emigrant vessels. A less flattering account of the first group: 60 select bundles of crinoline. They closed businesses and rushed out to actually kind of greet them. And some got married, some found other employments, some went bad, some were not that really unhappy. From the moment of landing, I was disappointed. I saw nothing beautiful about the new country. I used to cry myself to sleep every night. You know, Now the reason why these two colonies got united is because there was debt. It started life with this massive debt of 1.5 million and falling revenues. It was not a good time. It's interesting. It's mostly because of the bad economic situation that seems like British Columbia got united. It's like, okay, we're going to economize by putting you guys together. Oh God, we need to figure out something because we're not making money and we need some way to kind of survive. And that the Americans are coming. The problem is that the British Columbia is a long way off. There's this British colony here, and you're asking us to unify with Canada, which at this point was way the heck across in Ontario. All the stuff in between was just land that was that had been kind of licensed to the HBC. And there's just this whole thing of very much a kind of a scorn from the Brits, the ruling Brits in Victoria, to this kind of low democratic, just kind of class-based kind of snobbery that way, snobbery against people that, oh, you're not British, so why would we want to associate with you? We're British. There's definitely that split of the Vancouver Island Brits versus the mainland Canadian, what were termed as the Canadians. And so there's the two options. It's like, do we stay a British colony, or do we become a part of the Canadian Confederation, or do we allow ourselves to be annexed by the U.S.? And indeed, there was growing sentiment towards that, especially from kind of business people, from American miners and stuff like that, who had come up. That's like, hey, let's just unify with the states. And I mean, the states sort of took it as kind of as granted that this would happen. And indeed, like on the 30th of March, 1867. Just one day after the British North American Act received royal assent in London. That's basically the BNA Act was for the longest time the kind of our organizing constitution for what of Canada that created the Canadian Confederation. On the very next day, Alaska was sold to the Americans. So suddenly it's British Columbia, but it's sandwiched on both sides by American holdings, and that kind of increased the pressure that way, which is probably what we needed. That and the Brits themselves were not interested in the Pacific Coast particularly. They did that definitely means, like, as a colony, you're a bust. We want stuff that's going to make us money. If you can't make us money, we don't really want you. So it really cut the legs out from underneath the Brits in Victoria, who were like, oh, we want to remain a British colony. It's like, well, that's kind of getting pulled off the table. So do you want to become Americans? It's like, God, no. So that's where you end up deciding that, okay, we're going to be we're probably going to have to be in Canada. There's a new governor in 1869, Anthony Musgrave. Another, all these familiar names to me, and now I know where they're actually connected to. And he got instructions from the Colonial Office to get the colony into Confederation. Before that, there'd been resistance from the masters. Seymour was actually interested in that as well, but he got contrary instructions from the Colonial Office saying, no, we want to keep him out. Now they've changed their mind, get into the Confederation. So the pro-British had nowhere to go. And it was like basically, there was a lot of concern about like, oh, we're just going to become the satellite to this new Canada. Now the things they went to Ottawa and said, okay, here is the reasons, here are our demands, pay our debt, um, assume us having a bigger population, higher than the actual number of persons resident in Canada, so we're not swamped. We're not just tiny little fish in your pool and don't have any say. Give the retiring kind of government pensions to the administrators. The colonial administrators should get adequate pensions. And number 4, wagon trail to be replaced by a transcontinental railway. This got really boosted at the time because there had been the Manitoba uprising rebellion, Louis Riel, and the Ottawa said, oh, suddenly it's a really good idea to be able to have a train system that you could carry troops and to be able to put down stuff. So they's like, oh yeah, we're really for this transcontinental radio, this thing, and said, okay, within a decade, we'll get that. So in July the 20th, 1871, the British Columbia entered the Canadian Federation. So, we have had, like, in the less than a century, it passed through several political statuses and 2 economic booms based on a single resource. Oh, well, fur and gold were equally transient, exploit, move on. So there wasn't really that much of a kind of a keeping things held. It's interesting how much of, like, having a powerful personality like Douglas in control for, like, the gold rush was a big thing. He kind of kept a lid on things as much as he could, so that we didn't fall in with the Americans. But really interesting, like, how much the gold rush, this book says, like, how much the gold rush actually really influenced how quickly British Columbia, A, kind of unified, and then B, had to find options after that gold rush dropped out of, like, okay, we need to find something quickly. The Britons aren't interested in us. Are we going to go with the Americans, or are we going to go with this Confederation of Canada? And, there was definitely, in the mainland, there was definitely support for that and for kind of representation. Whereas in Vancouver Island, where I am now, the bastion of Britishness, they wanted, to stay a British colony if they could, and to stay in very kind of appointed, kind of just a little, the small group of people holding the reins of power, not representative. But that didn't happen. Or at least we'll find out how that plays out in Chapter 6. The young province, 1871 to 1900, so a year before my grandfather was born, is where we'll be. We will be next chapter. All right, more videos later.